Welcome to episode 2 of the 18 Minutes podcast. Today we're covering positive self talk. This is a pretty baseline practice as far as disordered anxiety recovery goes. So I thought it'd be a good place to start. As always, I'm not a licensed therapist or a medical professional. Please heed any advice you get from a professional and take only what's helpful to you from this resource. Positive self talk is so important because our minds believe what we tell them. It's a really important concept to grasp. And I think people, myself included, don't really believe the power that the words we tell ourselves in our heads have over our physical bodies. So, in the context of recovering from disordered anxiety, whether that be generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, agoraphobia, social anxiety disorder. There's lots of things you might be working on that this practice can be helpful to you in. And in that context, we don't want to be our own bullies and putting negative information into our minds to make this process of recovery even more difficult than it needs to be, because it is a challenge. It's not an easy thing to recover from a mental health issue. So, positive self-talk can actually remove some of the weight we carry and make this process a little more comfortable. I believe that even if this is the only change you make toward mental health recovery, you will see a difference in a week or two. That's how powerful this can be. So, I'm going to just get into a little bit of the science behind this first and then talk about some real life application. So, there's a lot of evidence that positive self talk has positive effects and benefits for our mood. And I think that is a little more intuitive that, if you are affirming in your mind, you might feel better emotionally. But there's also evidence that suggests that positive self talk is beneficial for our physical well being as well, which is crazy. It makes sense that our mood would be improved with positive self talk, but for our actual physical well being to be improved as well, mind blowing. But I believe it because I've felt the effects of this firsthand. So, a 2019 study from the United States Association for the Study of Pain found that self-compassion increased heart rate variability during the onset of pain, like a trigger, and the heart rate variability was actually associated with lower pain ratings from the test subjects versus the control group. So, positive self talk actually decreased perceived physical pain. I actually use positive self talk quite a bit to mitigate migraine headache pain. Every time I get a migraine headache coming on, I do all of the normal things that people do to mitigate the pain, but then also I have a favorite meditation that's very affirming and very positive, and it actually has made a huge difference in my perceived pain when I have a migraine attack. So, very interesting and confirms my anecdotal evidence for this, which is kind of fun. So, another study, the Mayo Clinic published an article that referenced several studies in 2023 stating that some of the physical health benefits of self-talk include increased lifespan, crazy, lower rates of depression, lower levels of distress and pain, which we just talked about, greater resistance to illnesses. And again, this is just from talking positively to yourself in your head. Better psychological and physical well-being, better cardiovascular health, reduced risk of death from cardiovascular disease and stroke, reduced risk of death from cancer, reduced risk of death from respiratory conditions, reduced risk of death from infections, and better coping skills during hardships and times of stress. Wild. I mean, if you don't understand or believe how connected our minds and thoughts are to our physical well-being, hopefully this will convince you. Okay, so there's a little bit of the evidence, just so you know, I'm not making this stuff up. And as I mentioned, positive self-talk is a really great place to start if you're just starting out on your recovery journey, but also if you have been doing exposure therapy or some other version of therapy and you haven't implemented this into your habits, I highly recommend it. So let's talk about how to do that specifically. I know that when we suffer with mental health issues, our minds are often mostly negative. The words that we say to ourselves, or even, some of this is a little bit vague because some people don't have an internal monologue exactly, but you're sort of feeling a certain way that is negative on purpose or believing certain things that are negative. And that is part of this whole thing as well. So I'm describing it as if it's an internal monologue, and just know that if you don't use words in your head to talk to yourself, that the feelings or imagery is essentially the same thing. So just apply that to your situation. So the first thing you can do is practice redirecting negative thoughts or images. So how this might look in real life is you might feel a little bit anxious, or you might be totally panicking, but regardless, you're feeling some anxiety symptoms and you have a thought that is, oh my gosh, it's happening again. As soon as that thought happens, notice you had a negative thought, say something positive. Okay, it is happening again, but I can handle this. I've handled this 100 times before. Oh, but it's getting worse. Okay, but it's also going to get better. I don't have to freak out about this right now. It's just anxiety. But what if it's not anxiety this time? I think I might actually have to go to the hospital. Okay. I'm recognizing that I feel scared. It's okay. I know how this goes. I can handle being scared. I'm safe. I'm okay. I can do what I'm doing. It's safe to panic wherever I am, so on and so forth. So for me at the beginning, this was like less than a second. It was like back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. And over time, as I practiced this habit, that got way easier. So those thoughts would not happen so quickly back and forth. I could actually, at this point, I've been doing this kind of practice for years. And if I do have a negative thought, I'm able to just redirect and stay focused on the positive. So that's the goal, and what you can look forward to if you do practice this, because it is a really beneficial tool just in everyday life, even aside from panic disorder. Okay, but what if I don't believe I'm capable of recovering and I don't have anything positive to say? Doesn't matter. You can say it anyway. And it matters to your brain because, again, your brain believes what you tell it. So even if you don't believe it, this is still a good place to start. And you should practice saying positive things even if you don't believe they're true. So telling yourself, I can do this. I'm going to recover. I'm not going to have disordered anxiety forever. Even if you don't believe it, those things are so powerful in recovering from disordered anxiety. So I highly recommend you start there, even if you don't believe it's true, and tell yourself that you are capable of overcoming a panic, an anxiety disorder. It's so valuable. Again, I reference these studies. There's so much more evidence and so many more studies about this, the effect on our mood, our emotional well-being, our mental health, our physical well-being, that show that positive self-talk alone changes our brain chemistry and changes our physical bodily chemistry as well in positive ways. So the last piece I want to say about this is a reference to a tip I have in my panic and anxiety guide, which is linked on my website. If you haven't checked that out yet, feel free. It's a free resource that goes into a little bit of a deep dive on the whole anxiety recovery process that helped me to recover. So the tip that I have in there, I call removing layers. And positive self-talk is a huge, well, I should say negative self-talk is a huge weight on us and a big layer to work through when working on our mental health. And by practicing positive self-talk, we can actually start to remove that layer and make the process easier. So other examples of layers would be having a messy house, if that's something that matters to you and that weighs on you, tidying up first thing in the morning before you go about your day, making the bed, taking care of your personal hygiene. I know for me, when I was really stressed and down and dealing with depression on top of anxiety, I would just stop taking care of myself. And that became a weight that then I had to deal with because I didn't feel good on top of all the other things that I was dealing with. So anything that's taking up room in your mind that doesn't need to be there is a weight that can be removed to make this process easier for you. And positive self-talk is such a good one to start with because you don't need anything but your brain to do it. And it's something you can practice all day, every day, and you can get good at it really quickly if you put effort into it. And that's why I recommend, if you don't know where to start with this because it's so accessible and makes such an impact on our recovery. Like with any habit, this does take practice. So if you decide to start this today and you do it for 30 seconds and that's all you can manage, perfect. That's how you practice. Start with little chunks at a time. Don't get discouraged when you try to redirect once and then the negative thoughts take over. Every redirect back is actually working the muscles of your brain and making this a habit. So do it as often as you think of it, as often as it's helpful, and don't get discouraged when you have negative thoughts because we can't help what pops into our brain. We can only help how we react to it. And so those redirects are actually incredibly helpful. Very similar to meditation, which I also recommend if you don't practice meditation. That act of focusing on something, drifting away from it, and then redirecting our attention back is super valuable, super important. It actually rewires our brain, which I'm talking about all the time. That's the goal here, is to rewire our brains to respond differently to triggers. And in that sense, we can sort of control what thoughts do pop into our heads because we're teaching our brains what we want them to do. Okay, so that's all I have on positive self-talk. Thank you so much for being here. If you have questions about this topic or comments, or you want to share your own experience, I would love to hear about it. You can comment on any of my social media videos or send me an email at amanda@the18minutes.com. I truly would love to hear from you. So again, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.